Chapter 2000, Facing Tribulations. Chapter 2000, Facing Tribulations, the rising generation is to be reckoned with. Emperor Shi looked at Yi Futian. He then smiled and said, "Under the rule of the great emperor, more and more prominent figures will surely appear in the divine prefecture. As long as the age of turmoil did not return, the number of cultivators would increase. Many exceptional figures would certainly appear with each passing generation. Compared to back in the day, the current environment of cultivation was so much better. What Emperor Shi says is true. After the great emperor unified the world, he ordered the powerful cultivators to spread their teachings in the divine prefecture, causing martial arts to prosper. Now we have many extraordinary figures in the Donghua domain, and Emperor Shi is also facing a tribulation. It is indeed worth rejoicing." A voice called out from afar. The crowd saw a group of figures walking over. Their leader was draped in a white fur coat. He appeared immaculate. His smiling gaze was full of vigor. Behind him, there were many cultivators. Each of them was a prominent figure. "The chief has arrived," Emperor Shi said with a smile. "We were wondering whether you would grace us with your presence. We never imagined that we would see you so soon." Ling Shao Palace Lord stated with a smile. Many people extended their greetings. The Donghua domain chief's manor consisted of the people sent to the Donghua domain by the great emperor. Nominally, the chief was the ruler of the Donghua domain and maintained the order within the domain. However, in the cultivation world, domain chief's manor rarely intervened in matters of the outside world. They were even less likely to interfere with the affairs of the top forces. They merely ensured no major incidents occurred. The world was too big. They could not manage all of it even if they wanted to. The world of cultivation had its own rules. Emperor Shi is facing a divine tribulation. How could I possibly miss it? The chief said with a smile. I also get to meet all of you here. Almost all of the top figures in the Donghua domain have come. It is a rare occasion. The arrival of the domain chief drew attention away from Yi Futian. He was also sizing up the domain chief and the cultivators around him. After the domain chief arrived, many top figures greeted him. The relationship between the giant figures of the Donghua domain was somewhat delicate. Although Dong Huang the Great ruled the divine prefecture, he did not directly control the various forces. Back then in the original realm, from the relationship between Princess Dong Huang and the other top forces, Yi Futian caught some hint of this. However, how powerful was the domain chief of the Donghua domain? Was he the most powerful person in the domain? The Millet Emperor had previously planned to let Yi Futian enter the domain chief's manor to cultivate. It would be much safer that way. Yi Futian was also considering whether to head to the domain chief's manor. However, at a glance, he could not tell what sort of person the domain chief was. At that moment, Chief raised his head and looked up into the sky. The pressure of the great path grew stronger and stronger. The weather changed and divine signs appeared. The sky above was enveloped in a suppressive aura. Dark clouds surged over from tens of thousands of miles around. It seems that I came at the right moment. Has the hour of reckoning arrived? Chief asked as he looked at Emperor Shi. Soon. Emperor Shi replied as he nodded. Before the tribulation arrived, I only had a faint premonition of its arrival. Now it has come. As he said this, he glanced around at the crowd and said, "Everyone, please vacate your seats and set up your defenses. Although this tribulation is aimed at me, I am worried that some of you might accidentally be hurt. I hope all of you will keep your guard up." Many thanks for Emperor Shi's reminder, the crowd replied as they nodded their heads. Next, in their own groups, the various cultivators gradually left their seats. The top figures walked ahead of the rest of them. The aura of the great path surged from their bodies. They were prepared at every moment. It is coming. All of you should stand back. Emperor Shi instructed the crowd behind him. The crowd immediately retreated. Emperor Shi raised his head and looked up at the sky. A terrifying aura coalesced. In the sky above, clouds of catastrophe surged rapidly, becoming more and more frightening. It is still gaining momentum, Yi Futian commented as he raised his head and looked at the sky. This divine tribulation of the great path seemed to have a life of its own. This aura made Yi Futian feel as though he was suffocating. It was as though the sky was about to collapse. A divine catastrophe could not be compared to this power. The Millet Emperor stood before the crowd and said, "We'd better retreat further back and give Emperor Shi some space." As he said this, the group of figures continued retreating backward. They were already beyond Turtle Peak. They stood in mid-air as they looked over where Emperor Shi was at. A powerful aura came from the Millet Emperor's body. It appeared to be an absolute domain of the Great Path that shielded the crowd. On Turtle Deity Island, almost all the cultivators were now looking up at the sky. They saw the terrifying clouds of catastrophe circulating above and gathering at Turtle Peak. The entire world seemed to turn dim. This scene was absolutely astonishing. Many people revealed astonished expressions when they felt this aura. Someone said in a low voice, "Will Emperor Shi be in danger?" The aura in the sky made them tremble. It was too frightening. If this power descended upon them, the consequences would be unthinkable. Emperor Shi's cultivation is high. Few people in the Donghua domain can compare to him. "He will be fine," someone else replied. The person seemed very confident, but the look in his eyes was serious. Clearly he was still somewhat worried. Emperor Shi was the legendary figure of Turtle Deity Island. No one wanted anything to happen to him. If Emperor Shi successfully faced this tribulation, he would then undergo another metamorphosis. There was a chance that he would become the strongest figure in the Donghua domain. Even the cultivators of Eastern Deity Island wanted to witness such a miracle. Beyond Turtle Deity Island, in the Divine Ocean, the people who were not on the island were also looking up at the sky. This terrifying scene could be seen far and wide. At this moment, the Divine Ocean continent had been stirred up. The cultivators of this continent could see the strange changes in the sky. Of course, the aura they felt was weaker the further away they were from Turtle Deity Island. It was not as terrifying as it was on the island. All the clouds of catastrophe were surging towards it. On Turtle Deity Island, thunder-punishing Skylord raised his head and looked into the sky. Dark purple light of catastrophe was gradually accumulating in the heavens above, shining down upon them. It contained destructive power that was frightening beyond comparison. Cracks of the Great Path seemed to appear in the space. The cracks were frighteningly deep. Even thunder-punishing Skylord felt an intense sense of caution well up in him. This was a divine tribulation. The Great Path would not tolerate Emperor Shi. The laws of this world did not allow for Emperor Shi to exist. This was also thunder-punishing Skylord's first time experiencing such power. As he watched the frightening destructive power that was constantly gathering, he gazed ahead and saw Emperor Shi standing alone in midair. His long robes fluttered around, even though there was no wind. A divine aura of the Great Path emanated from his surroundings. Right now, Emperor Shi was battling the very heavens itself. The terrifying light of destruction descended from above without a sound or presence. It blinded the eyes of those around. Many people could not resist closing their eyes. The blinding light tore apart the space. It directly descended and struck Emperor Shi. There was no terrifying rumble that people expected, only destructive power. Endless destructive light circled Emperor Shi's figure, seemingly tearing apart and destroying his body of way. At that moment, Emperor Shi's long hair danced around. There seemed to be destructive silver snakes wrapping around his figure. Terrifying cracks of the Great Path appeared in the space around him non-stop. Down below, Turtle Peak was instantly turned to dust without any warning. It disappeared just like that, as though it had never existed. The surrounding cultivators felt their hearts tremble. The various top figures blocked off the excess energy. The divine tribulation was like heavenly punishment. In the sky, an even more terrifying aura gathered, growing more and more horrifying. Many people were looking up into the sky. There seemed to be the swords of catastrophe. They pierced down from the sky above and penetrated this part of the sky. There was nowhere to hide at all as they chased and stabbed at Emperor Shi's figure. Rumble. Emperor Shi's long hair danced wildly. His clothes were torn, and his figure appeared to be penetrated by the light of catastrophe. He actually threw up a mouthful of fresh red blood. However, he still had a resolved look in his eyes as he looked up. There was an unprecedented determination in his eyes. After cultivating for 1,000 years, he finally waited for this moment. How could he allow the tribulation to destroy him? Since he had chosen to walk this path, He was destined to transcend this world and rise above the world order. Buzz! Emperor Shi's figure shot up into the sky. As the crowd watched with astonished gazes, he charged up directly into the sky and entered into the storm of destruction. In an instant, he was swallowed up by the raging vortex. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2001, Tribulation. Chapter 2001, Tribulation. In the Divine Ocean continent, countless people were looking up towards the heavens. In the sky above the continent, it was as though a deity was standing up there. Emperor Shi had become a divine deity. The destructive storm covered the space. Under the watchful gazes of the crowd, the powerful Emperor Shi was facing the onslaught of the law of the Great Path. Light of catastrophe of various colors was charging towards him, attacking his figure again and again. However, Emperor Shi was surrounded by a terrifying light shroud of the Great Path. He withstood the blows from the light of catastrophe. Rumble! A dull sound could be heard. The ocean was being pushed back. Huge waves churned on the divine ocean. With Emperor Shi as the center, an absolute domain of the Great Path emerged. It was as though it was the domain of a deity that formed its own independent space. An extremely dazzling galaxy circled his figure endlessly. Emperor Shi stood at the center of the galaxy, appearing to be its master. Legends told that deity-level existences possessed their own divine domains of the Great Path. Such existences transcended this world, and were not restricted by the laws of the Great Path. They existed high above the heavens, and were one with the universe, immortal and indestructible. This was what all cultivators pursued. However, it was said that only those with flawless great paths were qualified to chase after this goal. The heavenly law had changed. It did not allow for the existence of transcendent-level figures. Hence, this tribulation of the law of the Great Path had descended. Emperor Shi needed to complete all 3 stages to transcend. However, it was rumored that each stage was a life-or-death experience. Even for existences at his level, they could still perish to the tribulation and be destroyed. Emperor Shi had cultivated on Turtle Deity Island, in the Divine Ocean continent, for many years to prepare for this. The light of law rampaged. It charged into the light of the galaxy, and collided with the power of the Great Path of the galaxy. It annihilated the light of the galaxy. It was as though even the domain of the Great Path of the galaxy could not withstand the unending onslaught of the light of law. Emperor Shi's figure shone brilliantly, radiating divine light. Above his body of Wei, a gigantic shadow of a divine turtle appeared. It was a gigantic Xuanwu. It was like a boulder that enveloped Emperor Shi's figure. The galaxy and the Xuanwu protected his body. The people below felt their hearts tremble in astonishment. Emperor Shi was so powerful. Yet, such a figure had to go all out to face such a tribulation. Many Renhuangs trembled when they felt the might of the tribulation. Countless demonic beasts in the ocean did not dare to surface. They could only bow and submit to this power. This was a heavenly might that they could not resist. They were also only sensing the pressure of the might. This power was aimed solely at Emperor Shi, and would not attack them. At most, they would only feel the aftershocks. Millet Emperor retracted his defenses, allowing Yi Futian and the others to personally feel the power. This was Yi Futian's first time witnessing someone facing a divine tribulation of the Great Path. He was also in awe at what was happening. This tribulation was the most powerful event that the world could accommodate. Would Emperor Shi be able to withstand it? What is that? Yi Futian asked as he saw an even more frightening power accumulating above Emperor Shi. An endless storm of clouds of catastrophe gathered together. They were far from where Yi Futian was, but they still made his heart falter. A law attack of the Great Path is gathering over there, Millet Emperor explained. I have heard that every time a cultivator faces a tribulation, the law attack which appears is different for each of them. There is even a difference in power. I wonder what type of power of law Emperor Shi will attract. The divine light of the law of the Great Path coalesced. The light that radiated from there caused the people around here to cower in fear. The light was also blinding, resulting in people not daring to watch. The power gradually took form. It left the crowd in awe. It was actually a sword. A sword of law. The Millet Emperor's expression became serious. Teacher, is that law attack very powerful? Zhong Chan asked the Millet Emperor. If he could reach Emperor Shi's plane, he might experience a similar scene in the future and face his own tribulation. The Millet Emperor explained, it is very powerful. A sword of law gathers the swordsmanship of the heavens and the earth. It is considered an existence with terrifying attack power. For Emperor Shi, this might prove to be dangerous. This caused the hearts of the surrounding people to quaver. Would it pose a danger for a figure as powerful as Emperor Shi? This sword of law must be the most critical blow of the tribulation. In the sky, the darkness dissipated. Endless streaks of light of catastrophe gathered around the sword. A beam of light descended from the sky, seemingly penetrating this part of the world. The heavens were pierced through. If this sword attack landed on the divine ocean continent, it would even stab right through it. All of the cultivators of the divine ocean continent had stern expressions as they stared at the sword of law in the heavens. Before this, many people were excited about the event. Yet, right now, everyone was gazing up in the sky with profound respect. This was a tribulation, the first of 3 stages. Legends claimed that each stage was like passing through death's door. Passing each stage was like being reborn into a new life. There would be 3 stages of tribulations, each one stronger than the last. The third one was the most critical one of all. Legends said that very few people had managed to survive the last stage. Many transcendent figures had reached this stage, only to perish to the tribulation. Hence, some cultivators were willing to put off facing this last stage and cultivate in seclusion, preparing for tens of thousands of years to face it. The divine prefecture was too vast, it was practically endless. Many people believed that such reclusive figures as these old monsters, who had lived for countless eons, existed. At that moment, many people were worried about Emperor Shi. Could he withstand this law attack? Rumble. Intense rumbling could be heard. Futian's group lowered their heads and peered down. Beneath Turtle Peak, the earth shook, and huge cracks appeared on the surface, forming frightening chasms. From underground, seemingly buried beneath the earth, a gigantic creature appeared. It had the shell of a turtle. This humongous creature slowly rose into the sky. The crowd felt their hearts tremble intensely. This gigantic creature was actually a giant beast. A Xuanwu, a great turtle. The crowd revealed astonished looks. Beneath Turtle Deity Island, there was actually a hidden Xuanwu that no one knew about. It seemed to be hibernating without a sound or presence, and had become one with the earth. A deep sound could be heard as the Xuanwu let out a cry. The divine ocean roared, and huge waves churned on the surface. He raised his head, and then with a flash of his figure, he charged into the sky. In an instant he traversed the space. Such a gigantic creature was actually so fast. Before the witnesses could react at all, he had arrived beside Emperor Shi. You are already so old. Why did you come out from your burrow? Emperor Shi asked. To help you, the Xuanwu replied. That won't be necessary, Emperor Shi answered. The Xuanwu raised his head and looked at the sword of law. No one else understood Emperor Shi's abilities better than he did. Such a sword could destroy Emperor Shi's entire life's cultivation. I have slumbered for 1,000 years just for this day, the Xuanwu said. It is just as you said. There is no meaning in living forever. As he said this, his gigantic figure advanced and came up beside Emperor Shi. He actually merged with the gigantic shadow of the Xuanwu that was enveloping Emperor Shi's body. His eyes looked up at the divine sword, and a scorching glow burst out from them. The sword light splashed down. The crowd saw that in the heavens above, the sword of law was charging down. At that moment, the world was pierced right through. The Xuanwu lifted his head and bellowed. The heavens trembled, and earthquakes shook the continent. The divine ocean was sent into a frenzy, and huge waves swept over the various islands. The crowd felt their spiritual souls quavering. Their chi and blood churned within them. However, their gazes were still fixed on the sword in the sky. The sword stabbed down, and blinding divine light followed. It caused many people to involuntarily shut their eyes, not daring to look at it. Only Renhuangs could withstand the blinding rays of light. They squinted as they watched the sky above. They saw the galaxy shatter, and the sword stab down. The gigantic figure of the Xuanwu, the black turtle, was ripped apart gradually. However, the humongous beast still had an unshakable and calm look in his eyes. The great path collapsed and mountains and rivers shattered. However, he remained standing. The surface of the divine ocean continent was pierced through by the sword light. The body of the Xuanwu was not destroyed yet. The might of the great path was released to its utmost limit from Emperor Shi's body, merging with the Xuanwu. Emperor Shi's long hair danced frantically in the wind. His eyes revealed a pained expression. He had already prepared to face the tribulation, and had allowed people from all around to witness it. Regardless of whether he survived or died, he had prepared himself to accept it. At the same time, this was also a warning to the world of what a divine tribulation was. "Old friend, I'll be heading off first," said the Xuanwu with a muddy voice. His voice sounded exceptionally heavy, like a mountain. It was as though a part of the sky was pressing down on Emperor Shi. Be it man or demonic beast, those who cultivated sought the highest way. No one truly wanted to die. Even if they lived for countless eons, they would still be reluctant to die. The words of the Xuanwu had merely been to comfort Emperor Shi. At that moment, Emperor Shi did not ask the Xuanwu why he had done so. Instead, he calmed down and said, "You go on ahead. I will come find you in the future. For the next stages, if you cannot manage, just don't face them," said the Xuanwu. His body shattered under the sword, constantly exploding. It appeared as though the heavens and earth were falling apart. Endless divine light radiated from Emperor Shi's figure. He became one with the galaxy and was bathed in the residue sword light. After cultivating for a lifetime, was it still that difficult to face the first of 3 divine tribulations? Blinding light radiated, and the sword of law became beams of light that dispersed without a trace. Many people still had their eyes shut. After a long while, the clouds of catastrophe in the heavens above seemed to dissipate gradually. Countless people raised their heads and looked up into the sky. The sword had already disappeared, and the tribulation was also over. Only one person remained standing silently in the sky. It seemed as though he had been standing there for a long time. This figure was Emperor Shi. "Congratulations, Emperor Shi!" cried countless people from all over the divine ocean continent. Regardless of whether Emperor Shi could hear them, they were still happy for him. So this was a divine tribulation. They had taken it too lightly before. Now that they had witnessed a true divine tribulation, it was as though they had died and been reborn, and had actually experienced it themselves. Emperor Shi had gone through a life-or-death experience. "Congratulations, Emperor Shi!" cried out countless people on Turtle Deity Island, as they congratulated him on successfully facing the divine tribulation of the Great Path. The top figures looked at the silhouette in the sky. They did not say anything as they looked up in the sky quietly. To survive this tribulation, Emperor Shi had also paid an enormous price. The super-powerful Xuanwu had perished. They actually had not known that such a terrifying Xuanwu had been slumbering beneath Turtle Deity Island. Emperor Shi kept too low a profile. If it weren't for this tribulation, no one would have known. Unfortunately, such a gigantic Xuanwu had perished just like that. He had taken Emperor Shi's place, so that he could survive this tribulation. Emperor Shi stood high in the sky quietly. He just stood there. No one knew what he was thinking. However, they knew that for Emperor Shi, there was no joy in having passed the tribulation. For Emperor Shi, this was a tragedy. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2002. Demanding for People. Chapter 2002. Demanding for People. After a long while, Emperor Shi's figure floated down to the ground and came to an empty spot. The once tall Turtle Peak had been reduced to a plain. It was not just Turtle Peak. Huge chasms had appeared on Turtle Deity Island. Even the divine ocean continent had been pierced through by the sword. The surface of the ocean was constantly roaring now as the ocean surged back into the land. There was a huge hole down below. It was the place where the gigantic Xuanwu had slumbered. Emperor Shi stared at that spot, not saying anything for a long time. This Xuanwu had been his demonic beast companion. He had followed Emperor Shi for many years, and they had grown up together. Many years ago, the Xuanwu began his slumber. Upon his awakening, he had perished to aid Emperor Shi in facing the divine tribulation. Emperor Shi, do not grieve, said the chief of domain chief's manner. Brother Xuanwu has a righteous spirit. Aiding you in facing this tribulation must have been his wish. Do not feel so sad. The various top cultivators looked towards Emperor Shi. Although they were giant figures, for many of them, this was also their first time witnessing a divine tribulation. There were 3 stages for a divine tribulation of the Great Path. Each was more difficult than the previous one. This had only been the first stage, and it was already so terrifying. They thought to themselves that if they were to face the tribulation themselves, they would not have done any better than Emperor Shi. They would have most likely perished during this stage. The sword of law was too frightening. Such a blow was enough to destroy them. Now, Emperor Shi's abilities could only be compared to the chief of the Donghua domain. The others did not have the confidence that they could stand shoulder to shoulder with Emperor Shi. Teacher, please do not feel too sad. The thunder-punishing Skylord also spoke. Although he was a Skylord and a giant figure, he still called Emperor Shi his teacher, and was very respectful. Back then, if it hadn't been for Emperor Shi's guidance, thunder-punishing Skylord might not have been able to reach his current level. Emperor Shi nodded his head slightly. He turned his gaze to the crowd who was comforting him and said, "Thank you, all of you. My intention for facing the tribulation this time had originally been to allow the world to witness what a divine tribulation truly was. I had made peace with whether I lived or died to it. It is just that I never imagined that I survived while the Xuanwu had taken my place in dying. Nevertheless, if I cannot make it through the second tribulation, I'll go give him some company." Before the Xuanwu had perished, he had asked Emperor Shi not to face the second tribulation. However, Emperor Shi had clearly not taken his advice to heart. Having cultivated until his current level, Emperor Shi had his own beliefs. Regardless of whether he lived or died, he would give things a try. It was still the same now. However, after having felt the might of the first stage, Emperor Shi himself did not have high hopes of surviving the second tribulation. The Sword of Law appeared during the first stage. What would appear during the second? No one knew, but it would certainly be even more terrifying. Right then, Emperor Shi lowered his head and looked down below. He extended his palm forward, and immediately, the power of the Great Path began to accumulate. The hole in the ground was filled up, and then a mountain rose from the ground. Its shape was the same as Turtle Peak before it. It was as though everything from before had been preserved, just as it once was. After reforming Turtle Peak, Emperor Shi took a step forward and landed on it. The cultivators from the various top forces also headed over to where he was. They soon landed on Turtle Peak. Many people were somewhat curious as to how much Emperor Shi's abilities had improved after facing the tribulation. However, they would most likely not have the chance to know. Emperor Shi would not display it to them. Although the process was somewhat saddening, I still have to offer my congratulations. A person who has passed the first stage of a divine tribulation has appeared in our Donghua domain. Another legendary figure has emerged in the divine prefecture. The Donghua domain chief said, as he looked at Emperor Shi. It would have been inappropriate for others to have said this, but this person was instructed by Donghuang the Great to supervise the Donghua domain. He was the domain chief. There was naturally no issue with him stating such things. Emperor Shi replied, "The divine prefecture is vast and has countless cultivators. There are too many experts, and there are still hidden existences. The Donghua domain is similarly full of cultivators. The crowd that came here today are all among the top figures. In the future, there will be a surge of prominent figures emerging. For me to be able to survive the tribulation this time was already pure luck. It is not worthy of praise." He seemed to brush it aside casually. Experiencing this tribulation was equivalent to having a life-or-death experience. His mindset was more at peace. "You are too modest," said the chief. "Emperor Shi, are you willing to enter the domain chief's manor to cultivate? Or maybe the imperial domain? I am sure that His Highness also needs figures like you." Emperor Shi shook his head and said, I've grown accustomed to idling about. Also, I do not wish to leave. In the future, I will continue to stay here and cultivate. Matters in the divine prefecture's cultivation world still require the chiefs to bear the burden of the great emperor. The chief nodded his head. He was merely offering a suggestion. Such matters could not be forced. If that is the case, I will not continue to disturb Emperor Shi's meditation, said the chief with a smile. He then glanced around at the crowd and said, Everyone, if you have the opportunity, come visit the Donghua Heavens next year. My visit is somewhat abrupt this time. Next year, in the Donghua Heavens, I wish to meet with the prominent figures of the various continents. Since Chief has invited us, I will naturally not turn down the offer. The Lingxiao Palace Lord replied with a smile. This caused many people to give him a look. Lingxiao Palace was originally located in the Donghua Heavens. He would certainly have no problems with this, since he did not need to travel. I will consider it, responded Sword Goddess of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow. The others also give their own responses. We will also not disturb Emperor Shi's cultivation. Farewell, Sword Goddess declared. She was also someone with a flawless great path. Her cultivation was extremely potent, and she was known as one of the top existences in the Donghua domain. Having witnessed Emperor Shi face the tribulation, she was inspired and planned to continue cultivating in seclusion once she returned. If she were to invite a divine tribulation of the great path one day, would she be able to receive the sword of law? We will also bid farewell, members of the crowd said one after another. The tribulation passed, and there was no need for them to remain. Although they were acquainted with each other, that was all just formality. They were not on very friendly terms. All of them had only come for the divine tribulation. As it had passed, they should be returning home. Emperor Shi nodded his head. He did not ask them to stay. Or rather, he was not in the mood to ask them to stay. May all of you have a safe trip home, Emperor Shi said. All the cultivators slowly left Turtle Peak with their respective groups. Let's go, the Millet Emperor commanded Yi Futian and the rest. Everyone nodded in agreement and flew up to the sky. They followed the Millet Emperor and were ready to return to the Dongxiao continent. They left Turtle Peak and traversed in the sky. Hang on, Millet Emperor. A voice suddenly came from behind them while the Millet Emperor and his group were traversing among the clouds. The Millet Emperor stopped in his tracks. Everyone turned around and saw a group of cultivators approaching them. Very quickly, the approaching group caught up and stopped when the two groups were near. They stared at the Millet Emperor and the rest of his group. When the Millet Emperor saw the approaching group, he frowned. Yi Futian and the others also revealed cold looks. The person who had called out to them was the Prince of Great Yin ancient royal family. He stood at a distance from them with an imposing manner. He swept a glance over their group. Behind the prince, the cultivators of the Great Yin ancient royal family were also here. They were all looking at the Millet Emperor. A formless pressure enveloped this part of the sky. Previously, Yi Futian and the rest were already dissatisfied when Yin Dongyang from Great Yin ancient royal family led the cultivators of the Yin kingdom to the Wangshan watchtower. Moreover, the two groups had bad blood with each other. To begin with, Emperor Yin and the Millet Emperor were not on good terms with each other. Now most likely, nothing good would come from the prince calling out to them. Far off in the distance in different directions, the people who were initially about to leave noticed the situation over here. They could not help but stop in their tracks. Their wills emanated from their bodies as they observed the situation over here. It seemed as though the storm had yet to pass. Is there anything you need? The Millet Emperor asked as he swept an indifferent gaze towards Emperor Yen. The old grudges between them ran deep, but they did not resort to blows. The Millet Emperor's tone was clearly cold. He naturally would not give the other party face. Yes, there is, Emperor Yin replied while nodding his head. He said, Eastern Deity Island has once again begun to be active outside after so many years. They have actually emerged from Eastern Deity Island. Hence, I wish to demand a few people from the Millet Emperor. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: You can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2003, Go Against. Chapter 2003, Go Against. The Millet Emperor was quite calm. His expressions did not change much even after hearing his counterpart's words. Then he asked, "Who do you want?" Emperor Yin answered, "The people from Eastern Deity Island." "How do you want them?" asked the Millet Emperor. "Millet Emperor, you only need to ask them to follow me," answered Emperor Yin. "They are right over there. You can go ahead and ask if they want to go with you," answered the Millet Emperor as he pointed towards Yi Futian's group. Emperor Yin glanced at Yi Futian's group and said, "If they are not willing, then I can only ask them to go." "Please go ahead," the Millet Emperor said as he gestured with his hand, seemingly indifferent. The conversation between the two had no hostility. It was like a chat between two old friends. However, those looking at the two from afar could sense a confrontational aura around them. Did it mean that Emperor Yin could take them away, just because the Millet Emperor said that he could go ahead? After hearing the Millet Emperor's reply, Emperor Yin became even more hesitant. He stood there quietly, looking at his counterpart. The two stood in the air and looked at each other. At that moment, the atmosphere around the entire area became unusually dense and heavy. It was as if a frightening aura had shrouded them. It was as if a battle could break out at any time. Yi Futian and Goddess Penglai looked at the cultivators from the great Yin ancient royal family. They had indifferent and somewhat cold expressions along with sharp gazes. They did not show an ounce of fear. It was not so easy for the great Yin ancient royal family to use them. Since Senior Millet Emperor has replied, then I have no choice but to invite them to visit our great Yin. At that time a voice emerged. Behind Emperor Yin came the Crown Prince Yin Hanxing. He strode forward carrying a tremendous aura. His divine might of the great path covered the sky, while an intense pressure filled the sky. Faint cries and roarings of dragons could be heard in the distance. "Careful," Li Changxing reminded. He walked forward by himself. Then at that moment, a thunder-rumbling dragon's roar completely split the skies. Roar! A giant divine dragon seemed to appear in the sky. Its cries and roars crushed mountains, as well as rivers while heaven and earth crumbled. A frightening great path soundwave shot out, and transformed into a vast and scary storm of the great path that transformed the clouds and the sky. Yin Hanxing was a Renhuang at the cultivation level of the 9th plane. He was already a peak existence among Renhuangs. And as to how frightening was the song of the Yin dragon, one roar was enough to cause one's blood pressure to dip. Even Yi Futian could feel his internal organs tremble. His spiritual soul also shook intensely. It was excruciating. Behind him, droplets of blood dripped from the corner of Xia Qingyuan's lip. Her face turned pale. Bang! Yin Hanxing leaped into the air with one step, and a low and dull sound rang in the air. As if stepping on people's hearts, a violent and intense thumping tremor emerged. Everything seemed to have frozen. They looked at the figures striding towards them from the sky. At that moment, the crown prince of the great Yin royal family was like a god of war. He was domineering and unparalleled. Emperor Yin did not take action personally, so the Millet Emperor would not intervene. Instead, he watched quietly. Li Changxing stepped forward and released a powerful aura of the 9th plane. His divine wheel of the great path also emerged. It was a huge ancient tree. Its branches and leaves fluttered as they covered the sky. In an instant, it had spread all over the sky, enveloping Yin Hanxing's body within. Many people looked toward the battlefield. Li Changxing was an old man who had followed the Millet Emperor for many years. He was very strong. He did not usually display his true strength, and kept a very low profile. However, he handled most Wangshan Watchtower affairs, and the Millet Emperor rarely made an appearance. So in fact, Li Changxing was the equivalent of Wangshan Watchtower's most senior disciple. So, it was natural that he would be the one to fight the crown prince of the great Yin Hanxing at this time. While Zhongchan was a high-level Renhuang with a perfect great path, he had only recently broken through, and his cultivation level was only at the 7th plane. There was no guarantee that his combat strength was sufficient for him to defeat Yin Hanxing. After all, Yin Hanxing was not a common high-level Renhuang. Before becoming a high-level Renhuang, his divine wheel of the Great Path was also perfect and flawless. Yi Futian raised his head to look at the battlefield in the sky. Yan Hanqing's attack was overwhelmingly strong. However, Li Changxing's cultivation level was also very powerful. The divine tree seemed to have taken root in the sky. Roots spread out and sealed the area, trapping Yan Hanqing within it. Vong. Then, at that moment, the cultivators of the great Yin ancient royal family began to flash as they moved towards them. The Millet Emperor stood high up in the sky, as his gaze was fixed upon Emperor Yan. It was as if this battle was not related to them in the slightest. Last time, the great Yin ancient royal family led the cultivators of the Yinyan continent to test the Wangshan watchtower. This time, it was a real clash between the two sides. Dragon roars filled the air as the song of the Yin dragon continued to burst forth. The great Yin ancient royal family cultivators wanted to kill and defeat the practitioners of the Wangshan watchtower. Goddess Penglai's body disappeared in a flash. Like a swallow, her body soared through the air. And in an instant, she landed in front of those cultivators. Immediately after she landed, divine fire of the Great Path burst from her body, and a large illusion of a divine phoenix appeared. It let out a sharp, piercing shriek. From the body of the divine phoenix, endless crimson flame radiated from the feathers on the divine phoenix's body. Like indestructible flaming red swords, the flaming feathers cut down the cultivators. Then, a blinding divine light appeared and pierced through the skies and headed straight towards Goddess Penglai. It was a dragon lance. It transformed into a beam of bright golden light that broke through space, leaving a golden arc between heaven and death. The dragon lance arrived instantly, accompanied by a domineering dragon roar. The lance thrust forward towards its target, as if wanting to crush the sky. Goddess Penglai's body disappeared in a flash and transformed into a bolt of flaming red lightning. The two clashed together instantly, and their exchanges were so fast that one could not follow them with their naked eyes. In another location, an elder clad in a magnificent golden robe walked toward Zhongchan. His aura was stunning. He was also a being of the ninth plane, someone from the great Yin ancient royal family, a direct descendant of Yin royalty. His aura was frightening. Multiple pure-blooded dragons appeared in the sky. Each one of these dragons roared. He stretched his hand out and made a grabbing motion despite the gap between him and Zhongchan. However, as he did so, an immensely strong power of the Great Path appeared. Zhongchan felt his body in the sky being bound. Rumble! In the next moment, the elder's body transformed into a bolt of lightning and charged forward at a ridiculous speed, as if a divine dragon was charging forward. The entire area seemed as if it was going to be crushed into pieces. Before the person arrived, the will of the punch had already arrived. A frightening explosion sound came from the sky, and the area Zhongchan was in looked like it was going to crumble. At that moment, Zhongchan released his perfect grade aura of the Great Path. Seals converged around both his hands. In an instant, countless steels that looked like doors appeared in the sky, surrounding the entire area before slowly closing in, as an attempt to seal this Great Path space. Zhongchan raised his fist and charged forward. At that moment, a bright divine light of the Great Path burst forth from this body. Multiple doors of the Great Path appeared. Then, as if all 10,000 of these doors of the Great Path overlapped with each other, they merged into this punch. The two clashed together. Rocks were crushed, and the heavens were shocked. A violent bang rang in the air. Countless doors of the Great Path were punctured and crushed. Zhongchan's body appeared in the sky. More doors of the Great Path appeared around him. Every door contained an immense the Great Path's power of suppression that suppressed the space around him and transformed the area into a Great Path domain. The Great Path's power of suppression enveloped his opponent's body, the cultivator on the ninth plane. Even he was feeling immense pressure. Zhongchan also felt great pressure. After all, the one he was facing was a being on the ninth plane. Then, seals continued to converge around both his hands. In the sky, countless divine monuments of the Great Path appeared and surrounded them. Then, the space around them was sealed and transformed into a Great Path domain. Then an ancient aura began to spread. At that moment, Zhongchan was like a divine being. He waved his hands, and instantly countless divine monuments of the great path flew down from the sky. Rumbling noises filled the air as the pure-blooded dragons clashed with the divine monuments. Then they exploded. However, the divine monuments were so numerous that it seemed like they would never run out. Zhongchan's body emitted rays of light. As if summoning an ancient gate, the light became larger, and his power of suppression also became stronger. The divine dragons wailed. They were subdued. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Numerous divine monuments of different sizes pummeled downward, with his opponent's body as the target. An illusion of a divine dragon appeared above the 9th plane Renhuang, of the great Yin ancient royal family. The dragon let out a howl, and he stretched out his hands. The howl of the divine dragon shot out, but was completely suppressed. It could not get out of this space. Meanwhile, Zhongchan's attack seemed like it would never end. Many cultivators looked toward Zhongchan's battlefield. It was the gate to world suppression, the ultimate skill of the Millet Emperor's cultivation path. When the Millet Emperor released this skill, he could suppress an entire world and destroy all his enemies. Zhongchan's great path was perfect, so as expected, he was already capable of dealing with a being on the 9th plane. Outside the battlefield, the cultivators of all sides had initially planned to leave. However, they stayed behind because of this battle. They watched the battle at different locations. At one location were the cultivators of the Ling Shao Palace. The palace lord of Ling Shao Palace watched the battlefield and said, "The gate to world suppression of the Millet Emperor is, as expected, very powerful. Moreover, Zhongchan has already cultivated and learned its essence. To possess such combat strength while still on the 7th plane, he will certainly become a great person in the future." His voice traveled across the sky, and all the practitioners in that area could hear him. Beside him, a powerful Renhuang said, "Palace Lord, I have not fought against a person who possesses a perfect grade great path before. Now that a chance has presented itself, I would like to experience it." "Okay." The palace lord of Ling Shao Palace nodded and said, "The Great Yin and the Wangshan Watchtower hold no great grudge against each other. You do not have to be too serious. A light and friendly spar will do. Many factions have gathered here today. Just treat it as a trial." Just as he finished speaking, the earlier Renhuang stepped forward and left. He was also on the 9th plane. He headed straight towards Zhongchan. Just as Zhongchan was suppressing the Renhuang of the great Yin ancient royal family, his body appeared in the sky above Zhongchan. He released an immensely powerful aura of the great path and said, "It is a rare chance for me to come today, to ask for your guidance. Please do not be offended." After he spoke, he immediately started his attack. This scene had many people looking confused. What did the Ling Shao Palace want to achieve? Anyone who paid attention would be able to tell that this was due to a grudge between the great Yin ancient royal family and Wangshan Watchtower. Was the Ling Shao Palace's intervention their way of going against the Wangshan Watchtower? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. The practitioners of Wangshan Watchtower frowned. Since the practitioner from the Ling Shao Palace really went for it, Zhongchan could only fight back. The practitioners of Wangshan Watchtower frowned. Since the practitioner from the Ling Shao Palace really went for it, Zhongchan could only fight back. The Millet Emperor watched everything quietly in the sky. His expression remained the same, as he inadvertently glanced toward the palace lord of the Ling Shao Palace. No one could tell what he was feeling. At that time, Ling He of the Ling Shao Palace also strode forward. He looked toward Yi Futian and said, "I was really impressed by Brother Ye's display the other day at the cliff, which is why I would like to consult and learn from Brother Yi. I hope you won't hesitate to enlighten me." Many people looked toward Ling He. What was going on with the practitioners of Ling Shao Palace? Why were they so intent on fighting the people from Wangshan Watchtower? Moreover, they chose to do so at this time. Clearly something was wrong. The eyes of the practitioners from Turtle Deity City, watching from afar, flashed as they saw this scene. They investigated and found out some things that Yi Futian was not aware of. However, It was not related to them. They initially had no plans to bring it up, as it would cause conflict. However, looking at the situation now, it was clear that Ling Xiao Palace wanted to go against Wangshan Watchtower. As for Lin He was trying to force Yi Futian into a fight. If Yi Futian did not know his opponent's true attitude and thinking, they were afraid he would suffer a huge loss. At that time, a person looked to a location not far away from where Thunder Punishing Skylord stood, and transmitted his voice, Skylord. Thunder Punishing Skylord looked at the person who transmitted his voice. It was the City Lord of Turtle Deity City. Since they were both students of Emperor Shi, they naturally knew each other. Moreover, their relationship was decent. Skylord left behind a relic at the cliff in the past. I heard that a battle took place there recently. This practitioner of the Wangshan Watchtower defeated Ling He and obtained the relic that you left behind, said the City Lord of Turtle Deity City. Thunder Punishing Skylord answered, I am aware of this. At that time, this practitioner of Wangshan Watchtower brought 2 other people onto the Turtle Deity Island. After they separated, the 2 were killed by people from Ling Xiao Palace. If my guess is correct, Ling He was the one who gave the order. The murderer has been following Ling He ever since he committed the act. The City Lord continued to transmit his voice. Thunder Punishing Skylord's eyes squinted slightly as a sparkle of electricity crackled in his eyes. He looked toward Ling He. The young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace continued to utter the words Brother Yi continuously and seemed very friendly. Earlier, he was also very generous when complimenting Yi Futian. It looked like he was a gracious loser who had genuinely accepted his defeat. Even though most could still feel a sense of oddity, none paid too much attention to it. However, to commit an act like this behind another's back, it was somewhat disgusting. At the very least, he could not accept such despicable behavior. He understood the meaning of Turtle Deity City Lord's meaning. Yi Futian obtained his relic, and could be considered related to him. The incident also started because of the relic. The City Lord was hesitant on whether he should reveal this fact. So as a solution, he passed the message to him instead. He does not know of this, asked Thunder Punishing Skylord by transmitting his voice. He should not be aware of it, answered the City Lord. At that time, Ling He stepped through the air and landed in the space in front of Yi Futian. Then, Yi Futian glanced at him and replied, not interested. He did not really like Ling He. The fact that the Ling Xiao Palace had chosen to make a move at this time disgusted him even more. Naturally, he was not interested in sparring with Ling He. If he had to fight, should he fight seriously? Even though he did not want to go all out, Wangshan Watchtower was already facing pressure from the Great Yin ancient royal family. And now, the Ling Xiao Palace had also decided to make a move. However, he also did not want Wangshan Watchtower to face the threats of 2 powerful forces at the same time. Then, Yi Futian heard a voice transmitted to him, Yi Liunian. He looked surprised as his gaze shifted toward the person who spoke to him. I have something I need to tell you. The people from Turtle Deity Island discovered that the 2 practitioners who followed you into Turtle Deity Island were killed after you guys separated. They found that it was Ling He who gave the order. However, they did not dare reveal this piece of intel lightly. Someone notified me of this just now, and I decided to let you know as well. You should just be prepared. The voice transmitted into Yi Futian's ears. He already knew whose voice it was. It was Thunder Punishing Skylord. The Skylord personally transmitted his voice to inform him. Naturally, Yi Futian did not doubt the authenticity of the message. The incident had definitely happened. Lin Yuan and Lu Qing, the 2 practicing spiritual partners, were killed by someone under the orders of Ling He. While the 2 of them were not very strong, they had still reached the Sage Plains cultivation level. They were very young, and they still had the best years of their lives ahead of them. After they learned that Emperor Shi would go through a divine tribulation, they tried to get to Turtle Deity Island. They met Yi Futian at the cliff and asked him to bring the 2 of them to Turtle Deity Island. However, they never would have imagined that they would be killed in such an aggrieved manner. At that moment, an intense rage emerged in Yi Futian's heart. The fire burning in his heart was so strong that his entire body trembled slightly. However, he still managed to keep it under control. It had been a while since he last felt so enraged. Even the ruthless incidents he encountered when he first came to the Divine Prefecture did not enrage him as much as the current moment. Ling Yuan and Lu Qing were not really close to him. They were only acquaintances he met on the road. He brought the two along and arrived together with them on Turtle Deity Island. No relationship had even been established, which was why, after they arrived at Turtle Deity Island, they separated and went their own way. He did not try to make them stay. After all, they were from different worlds. However, due to a trivial incident at the cliff, Ling He had chosen to secretly send someone to kill the two juniors instead of targeting him directly. In front of Ling He, practitioners at the plane levels of Lin Yuan and Lu Qing were only like ants. They could be crushed easily and possessed no power to resist. He could imagine the despair of Lin Yuan and Lu Qing, two energetic youngsters who had arrived enthusiastically to observe Emperor Shi's divine tribulation. However, just as they arrived, they were obliterated mercilessly. While their plane levels were low, getting to the sage plane would have also been tough. Like himself back then, every step he took was filled with difficulties, but he kept going. However, death was just absurd. Moreover, this murderer of Lin Yuan and Lu Qing was still acting gracefully in front of everyone, calling Yi Futian brother Yi, and showering him with generous compliments. Yi Futian raised his head to look at that face. He felt intense hate, to the point where he was nauseated. Ling He looked at Yi Futian from a certain distance. He still looked graceful, with an air of exuberance around him. He held an amazing status. He was the young palace lord of Ling Shao Palace, and possessed great strength and exceptional potential. One could even say that not many in the Donghua domain could compare to him. So it was natural that he was in high spirits. In his eyes, two sage plane level practitioners were probably not even worth his attention. A gentle smile was inside Ling He's eyes. However, he saw Yi Futian raise his head and glare at him. A cold and piercing gaze shot at him for a brief moment. That glare made him uncomfortable. It was cold and emotionless. He could even detect a hint of killing intent. Ling He's heart was also icy. It was just as well. After all, he also had the same idea. He never imagined that Yi Lionian would think the same thing. Brother Yi received enlightenment of the path at the cliff. Your talents are remarkable. Don't be stingy in guiding others, Ling He continued. Clearly, he would not let Yi Futian reject his request. Ling Shao Palace had already initiated the attack. Even if their counterparts did not want to, they would be forced to fight. Yi Futian looked at him. He had changed his mind. However, he did not reveal the truth he had learned. Ling Shao Palace was one of the strongest factions. The reason why the people from Turtle Deity Island hid the information was most likely due to this as well. If he were to reveal it after the thunder-punishing Skylord notified him about it, it would be like selling them out. It was immoral. From what Ling He did to Lin Yuan and Lu Qing, who knew what else would he do in the future? This was a person who ignored other people's lives. He did not care at all. Yi Futian looked at Ling He and said, "It looks like you will fight, regardless of whether I agree to it or not." Ling He smiled and looked at Yi Futian. He moved his foot forward. The aura of the Great Path began to exude from his body, and might filled the sky. He did not reply. Obviously, he was responding with his actions. Earlier, when the Ling Shao Palace cultivator tried to initiate a fight with Zhong Chan, did he not also just started fighting? He did not even consider the fact that Zhong Chan was still in the midst of battle. I lost to Brother Yi when it came to enlightenment at the cliff. That is why I want to receive your guidance in the form of a battle, Ling He said casually. He looked down at Yi Futian, with an arrogant expression on his face. While Yi Futian was quite famous, having defeated Yin Dongyang before, Ling He was not a common character. Yi Futian was still not on his radar. When he lost in receiving enlightenment of the path, he contributed his loss to luck. On the surface, he complimented and praised Yi Futian, but in truth, he was still incredibly proud. Otherwise, he would not have so easily gave the order to kill Lin Yuan and Lu Qing. He did not care. Do you want me to take this? From behind Yi Futian, Beigong Ao walked forward and transmitted his voice to Yi Futian. The opponent's plane level was higher than Yi Futian's. His aura of the Great Path was also powerful. He was worried that Yi Futian would be at a disadvantage. Ling He was also someone whose Great Path was at the perfect grade. He was a titan-like force, the great heir to Ling Xiao Palace, and not some common folk. Yi Futian stretched out his hand and gestured for Beigong Ao to step down. Seeing his gesture, Beigong Ao understood and retreated behind. Meanwhile, Yi Futian walked forward and looked up at Ling He, who was standing in midair. My plane level is higher than Brother Yi. Brother Yi, please go ahead and initiate the first strike, said Ling He, continuing to act gracefully and politely. He had come to force Yi Futian into fighting him. However, he still maintained a battle etiquette to allow Yi Futian to strike first. However, with the plane level advantage, what was the meaning of being able to strike first? A person's plane level was always the main factor deciding the outcome of a battle. Ling He might seem like he was gracious, but the truth was that he was shameless. It was never a fair battle in the first place. Okay then. Nonetheless, Yi Futian accepted the answer directly. He looked at Ling He and said, "Since there's a difference in our plane level, I will do my best and go all out." "Relax, I naturally understand. Please go ahead, Brother Yi." Ling He laughed in his mind. Yi Futian's answer was exactly what he wanted. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2005, Fight. Chapter 2005. Fight. Yi Futian raised his head to look at Ling He. Formless sword wheels began to form around his body. The sword wheels became stronger and stronger. With his body as the center, they created a vast sword domain. Numerous sword wheels poured into the sky as if they were unlimited. Then, they converged and transformed into a sword river. Multiple immaterial swords appeared around Yi Futian and circled his body, creating sharp whistling noises as they zipped around. These created an illusion for all those watching. It was as if the vast land and sky had been filled with swords. Path of the sword current flowed between Yi Futian and Ling He. As expected of someone possessing a perfect grade Great Path, who defeated Yan Dongyang with just one sword strike. Amazing. Ling He complimented. However, he also possessed perfect grade Great Path. Who knew who he was actually complimenting? A powerful aura burst from his body. While Ling He had always looked down on Yi Futian's existence, he would never underestimate his opponent in a real fight. With such powerful sword wills, an attack would only last a single moment. Even though he had promised to let Yi Futian strike first, he would not simply sit idly by. He was going to at least make preparations to respond accordingly. Around his body, an extremely beautiful golden pagoda appeared. Strands of golden aura flowed out from within the pagoda. At that moment, Ling He was donned in golden armor. The auras flowing from the golden fantasy-like pagoda were sharp and domineering. Then they converged and transformed into an extremely sharp golden spear. Ling Xiao Pagoda. Everyone looked toward Ling He. It was a divine wheel of the Great Path, crafted by the souls of the powerful cultivators of the Ling Xiao Palace. Moreover, it was not just one divine wheel of the Great Path. The Ling Xiao Pagoda was one of the divine wheels of the Great Path. Inside the Ling Xiao Pagoda was a spear. It was another of his divine wheel of the Great Path. They had melded together, and the might exuding from it was frightening. Many people had shifted their gaze toward the battlefield of Ling He and Yi Futian. With regard to these two names, there was naturally no need to mention Ling He, the young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace. He had made his name from a long time ago. He was strong and exceptionally talented. Meanwhile, Yi Futian became famous in Wangshan Watchtower. He defeated the great Yan ancient royal family prince, Yan Dongyang, with just one sword strike. Among the mid-level renhuangs in the Donghua domain, these two were most likely considered best of the best. They possessed extraordinary strength. Vong, Yi Futian's body, seemed to have transformed into a great path furnace. Refining the sword of heaven and earth, an indomitable will surged from his body. It was as if his body had turned into a divine sword. Multiple swords surrounded him. Around 9 swords seemed to have resonated, and were circling him. At that moment, countless sword wills in the sky resonated, and the surrounding area transformed into a sword domain. Countless paths of the sword aura currents resonated with each other, and flew towards Ling He at the same time. Meanwhile, a sword river appeared between Yi Futian and Ling He. Within the sword river was a sword silhouette. It reached an area in front of Ling He from Yi Futian instantaneously. It was as if there was no distance between them. With one thought, the Ling Xiao pagoda suddenly released a large number of golden currents. The endless spear shot into the air and zoomed into the sword river. At the same time, the area between him and Yi Futian seemed to have been shrouded by the will of the Ling Xiao pagoda. Multiple pagoda illusions dropped consecutively, blocking Yi Futian's deadly attacks. Go! The Ling Xiao pagoda in front of Ling Xiao flew forward. A gigantic pagoda loomed over the sword river. A frightening sword will charged into the pagoda and vanished completely. Only ringing sounds of the pagoda remained. Then a light could be seen. A blade of light of a sword directly charged into the pagoda. Ring! An intense sound filled the air. The pagoda seemed to have suffered a heavy hit, and was blown backward. Ling He stretched out his hands to catch it, and was forced to retreat. Golden divine light burst from his eyes. He was careless to have actually been thrown back by Yi Futian's strike. His palms slammed outward violently. In an instant, the Ling Xiao pagoda spun forward violently, growing bigger at the same time. It transformed into a humongous golden divine pagoda. From this divine pagoda, numerous pagoda silhouettes appeared and flew towards Yi Futian. At the same time, a golden spear flew out of the Ling Xiao pagoda. The spear arrived in Ling He's hands instantly. He grabbed the spear, donning his golden armor, with a golden spear in his hand, and the Ling Xiao pagoda floating above his head. He looked like a war god at that moment. Peerless and elegant. Thunder-punishing Skylord looked at this battlefield. His words led to Yi Futian's decision to fight, so it was natural that he would pay more attention to this battle. Ling He misbehaved and treated others terribly. However, he was genuinely strong. Among the next generation leaders of the top factions of the Donghua domain, none were weak. Ling He was the heir to the Ling Xiao palace. If one only looked at his strength, he was indeed one of the greats. However, from his past actions, it was easy to tell that Ling He was prideful and self-absorbed. He did not care about the lives of others, and did not care about the consequences of his actions. He only did what he wanted to do. Apart from thunder-punishing Skylord, the heiress of the Ice Temple, Qin Qing, was also interested and was paying attention to this battle. She was a mid-level Renhuang, who had cultivated for many years. So naturally, she did not only look at the surface when it came to most issues. She knew that while Ling He was showering Yi Futian with praises and compliments, the truth was that he wanted to kill him. If he did not compliment his would-be opponent, how would he get him to fight? In her experience dealing with Ling He, she knew that he was self-absorbed and egoistic. While he had always been polite with her, he had always found it hard to hide his arrogance. However, she could understand this and did not think too much of it. After all, for a person as talented as Ling He, who also held an esteemed position and had cultivated to his plane level, how could he not be proud? She was also proud. Anyone at this level would be the same. As such, when the incident at the cliff occurred, even though it seemed like Ling He did not mind, he was most likely still brooding about it. That was why he provoked Yi Futian at this time, to start this battle with Yi Futian, so that he could crush him in front of an audience. Moreover, Ling He's plane was higher than Yi Futian. He was a very well-known character in the Donghua heavens. He should be a lot stronger than Yin Dongyang. If he were to make a move, his chances of winning were actually quite high. Yi Futian would be at a disadvantage. With his white hair and white outfit, Yi Futian stood amidst the battlefield. Above him, the giant Ling Xiao pagoda released a frightening golden current that transformed into countless pagodas that flew towards him, creating Ling He's great path domain, sealing him within. At another location, Ling He held the golden divine spear. He could release it at any time. It was a great threat to Yi Futian. It was, unfortunately, very difficult for his swords to deal with Ling He. Under the overwhelmingly powerful Ling Xiao pagoda, Yi Futian seemed rather small. However, strands of formless current exuded from his body. The current seemed to freeze everything around it. With his body as the center, the temperature within the Great Path domain began to drop. Strands of current surged forward like the branches and leaves of an immaterial tree. With his body as the center, the current quickly covered the entire Great Path domain. Rustling sounds could be heard. When the Great Path current solidified, a huge towering divine tree appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Futian served as the divine tree's roots. Its numerous branches spread all around. Strands of dark and cold aura radiated from the divine tree. So cold. Many people looked toward Futian. Even a few top cultivators looked toward him. Was that the Great Path of Frost? The sword goddess and many practitioners from the divine palace of fluttering snow also shifted their gaze on Futian. Apart from mastering the long sword, they were also adept at the Great Path of Frost. However, the aura seemed to be a little different. The aura radiating from Futian's body seemed even colder. However, every practitioner possessed different levels of strength. Flames of the Path of Flame also had different strengths. It was the same for the power of Frost. The Lord of the Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow, however, felt something odd. Something was not right. It was not the power of the Great Path of Frost. In the battle, the two each released their Great Path domain. It was as if the battle had turned into a battle between Great Path domains. The Ling Xiao Pagoda released a frightening golden current, while shooting several pagodas to pummel Futian. However, within the chilly Great Path domain, all attacks seemed to be obstructed and limited. Their speed reduced, and the branches in the sky quickly extended toward and wrapped around those pagodas, absorbing them within before sealing them in ice, ultimately turning them into dust. Ling He frowned as he witnessed this scene. He stretched out his palm, and the Ling Xiao Pagoda instantly floated into the sky. His Great Path domain sealed the sky, and a frightening current burst from within, annihilating all things in its range. The branches and leaves were crushed under the golden Great Path current. However, branches and leaves kept spreading from Futian's body. There was no end to them. This ancient and divine tree was an eternal being, and it had an incredibly exuberant life force. The divine tree of the Eastern Deity Island. A cultivator from the great Yan ancient royal family stared at the tree growing from Futian's body and said, "Who'd have thought that the Eastern Deity Island's divine tree was passed on to him? It looks like they plan on making him the heir of the Eastern Deity Island." Many seemed shocked after hearing this. To make Futian the heir to the Eastern Deity Island? Did this mean that the Eastern Deity Island chose Futian before he was sent to Wangshan Watchtower? If that were the case, the great Yan ancient royal family would want to kill him even more. Ling He suddenly directed his palm towards Futian. In that instant, the giant Ling Xiao Pagoda floating in the air slammed downward. Blades of divine light annihilated anything they touched. Instead of releasing the Great Path current to attack, the divine wheel of the Great Path attacked directly. Ling He had clearly realized that the Great Path current could not do anything to Futian. It was just a waste of time. As the divine and holy Ling Xiao Pagoda descended from the sky, destructive currents that accompanied its descent completely destroyed the leaves and branches from the ancient tree that got close. None of the branches could get close to the pagoda, and the Great Path completely suppressed the entire area. The Ling Xiao Palace continued its descent towards Futian's body. At the same time, Ling He clenched the divine spear in his hands tightly. He took a step forward, and his body under the magnificent golden armor released an indomitable aura. Step by step, he walked toward Futian. His aura strengthened after every step, and strands of surreal currents appeared from his body. They looked like they were the condensation of his fighting spirit. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2006, Ensnared. Chapter 2006. Ensnared above Futian, the celestial splendor of Ling Xiao Pagoda swept down, and the void roared, oppressing the space where Futian was. Phantoms of the divine pagoda slammed down continuously, covered Futian within it. Those branches, leaves, and vines that were twirling toward Ling Xiao Pagoda were pulverized immediately. As divine splendor spread out, Ling Xiao Pagoda was getting closer, falling from above Yi Futian like a towering temple. Yi Futian morphed into a divine tree, its branches and leaves twirling madly. A supreme sword will was gathering at the same time. Infinite divine swords converged until a massive divine sword appeared in front of him. The infinite sword will was still integrating into the divine sword. Its sword light was radiant, bright, and flawless. Yi Futian pointed his finger toward the sky. Suddenly, the divine sword pierced upward, colliding with Ling Xiao Pagoda. A sword river appeared between Yi Futian and the pagoda. There was an infinite sword will in this sword river that blended into the divine sword. A splendid sword screen was created where the collision occurred, radiating toward the surrounding areas. Ling He, who was walking in the void, cast a glance. With a turning of his mind, he took control of the divine wheel of the great path, as Ling Xiao Pagoda continued to spin, and the pagoda's divine brilliance sprinkled from above. A dull sound was heard, and even the void gave a violent tremble. Phantoms of the pagoda appeared all around them, as they suppressed down at the same time. The vast world was now seemed to be in the realm of the divine pagoda. Yi Futian's body seemed to tremble as well. The divine sword shuddered, and the sword screen rippled but did not tear. The crowd found that Ling Xiao Pagoda was vibrating and spinning on its own, causing a wondrous rhythm between heaven and earth, suppressing and shattering this side of the void. For those whose cultivation was not strong enough, this atmosphere alone could kill them immediately. The divine will would have shattered their organs. The branches and leaves of the divine tree surged with insane speed. Those extremely thick branches and leaves were like vines of 10,000 years, winding around the sword screen. The area it invaded was getting larger, covering all the space in the surrounding area. At the same time, they constantly swept toward the pagodas that were between heaven and earth. At this moment, Yi Futian was like the tree god of 100 centuries, who had nurtured lives into being. Whose great path is the stronger? More and more people noticed the battlefield of the two of them. Both of them were very strong, and far surpassed those of the same realm. Yi Futian, especially, surprised many people. After all, Ling He, the young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace, had achieved his fame for a long time. Although he had battled brilliantly, no one had actually witnessed his fight with Yan Dongyang. Therefore, most of the observers were there to see for themselves. Now, it seemed that he had not earned his name in vain, and he was powerful. However, if Yi Futian's divine tree and divine wheel of swordsmanship were used to resist the suppression of Ling Xiao Pagoda, how was he going to deal with the attack from Ling He himself? Perhaps Yi Futian would still be at a disadvantage, and he would still be in danger. The fighting spirit on Ling He, who walked steadily toward Yi Futian, became stronger as he got closer, and an astonishing turbulence of the great path had formed around him. He stared at Yi Futian with those golden eyes, and at this moment, there was an iciness in the depth of his eyes. Yi Futian was an expert at swords. If the sword was used to block the pagoda, how would he deal with the spear? The golden divine spear held in Ling He's hand let out a horrific spear aurora. As he approached Yi Futian, his arm cocked back. Suddenly, his body was the center, from which numerous spear shadows appeared everywhere. An astonishing spear will erupted before the spear was released, turning into a golden beam and shooting straight at Yi Futian. Clearly, Ling He understood that it was impossible to hurt Yi Futian with spear will alone, but it would not be so easy to block his shot either. Brother Yi, be careful. Ling He stopped at this point. Though he had stopped, his momentum had climbed to the limit as golden divine brilliance diffused from him. At this moment he, who was wearing the golden armor, was like a god of war. That's Ling Xiao Palace's Lingxi spear. Watch out! A voice reminded Yi Futian. The voice belonged to Thunder Punishing Skylord. Yi Futian was in a somewhat unfavorable situation, and Lingxi spear techniques was well known throughout the Donghua domain. The palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace, with Ling Xiao Pagoda and Lingxi spear at his disposal, had few rivals within the Donghua domain. He had tremendous strength, and if Yi Futian was careless, a strike could be the end of him. Thank you for reminding me, Elder. Yi Futian's response baffled Thunder punishing Skylord. He looked at Yi Futian, who was trapped in the distance. Yet he still had the time to respond to him. It seemed that he still had strength and mind to spare. Maybe everyone had underestimated him? They could only wait and see. Everyone stared at Ling He. The Lingxi spear was swift and invincible, and battles usually ended in an instant. The Ling Xiao pagoda would suppress while the Lingxi spear techniques finished the job. The dual powers complemented each other, making them victorious wherever they went. This time, dealing with this well-known heir of Eastern Deity Island, there shouldn't be any doubts. At this moment, countless phantoms appeared between heaven and earth, as well as infinite shadows of spears. Ling He made his move. The crowd only saw a spear aurora, as a golden spear shadow appeared between Ling He and Yi Futian. There was only an afterimage left where he was. A single strike from Lingxi's spear was enough to conquer gods and demons. Bang! A loud noise came out as the Lingxi spear encountered something tough. The terrifying golden divine glory bloomed in front of Yi Futian, who at this moment was wrapped by a boundless gigantic divine elephant. Violent elephant trumpeting sounded, and two hands reached out to hold the spear coming for him. Divine wheel. Everyone was slightly surprised when they saw the sight in front of them. Another one of Yi Futian's divine wheel of the Great Path, a towering majestic divine elephant. Ling He glanced at Yi Futian indifferently as shrill sounds could be heard. Overwhelming golden divine glory erupted from him as the spear continued to move forward, piercing into the body of the divine elephant. The sound was particularly harsh, as it was aimed to break open Yi Futian's divine wheel of Great Path. However, at the same time, Ling He saw a pair of extremely horrifying eyes. An extreme chill rushed into his pupils, wanting to freeze his spiritual soul. At the same time, his body also felt the chill, so very cold, seeping deep into his bones. Everyone discovered to their shock that the domain of the divine tree had already enveloped this entire part of the world. An extreme frosty current enveloped and circulated this domain. An extreme coldness threatened to freeze everything, turning the temperature into absolute zero. Ling He felt that his spear, his body, and even blood were about to be frozen. Everything seemed to become slower, even his heartbeat. How could it be? What kind of ability was this? Had Yi Futian been waiting for him here all this time? Using the divine sword to block Ling Xiao pagoda, with everything he's got just to wait for him to get close? At this moment, Yi Futian's eyes were icy. There was a hint of icy murderous intent within. He stared at Ling He and let out a roar, accompanied by the Buddha sound of the Great Path. This space was covered by a soundwave of Buddhism, the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm, in such a short distance, attacking his spiritual soul. Ling He felt his spiritual soul trembled, as he was enduring the invasion of the power of Yin, and the attack of the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm. His spiritual soul was about to collapse and shatter. He felt that unconsciousness was imminent. These layers of attacks were set up like traps, waiting for him to break in and ensnare himself. Everyone outside was bewildered by this sudden sight as well. The continuous burst of multiple abilities in a short time caught everyone by surprise. Everyone had thought that it would be Ling He suppressing Yi Futian, but they did not expect that the situation would be turned on its head in a split second. After an astonishing reversal, it seemed that Yi Futian had been lying in wait for Ling He. His ability is so strong, so many great paths. Some were amazed and quite shaken inside. It was rumored that Yi Futian had defeated Yan Dongyang with the sword. The world thought that Yi Futian was an expert at swordsmanship, but they never expected that he was good at so many other abilities. Yi Futian stared at Ling He and did not bother to disguise the murderous intent in his eyes. At this moment, Yi Futian raised his palm and slammed forward. The sounds of elephants rocked the sky. As the gigantic palm slapped down, Ling He sensed a strong sense of danger. Massive golden glory burst from his body, and countless phantoms appeared around him. Buzz! An astonishing brilliance burst from the long spear in his hands. It was as if countless phantoms struck at the same time, continuing to fight. With a violent crashing sound, Ling He moved. The overwhelming intent of battle helped him break free of the chill. It seemed that endless phantoms of spears erupted from him, just as the Ling Xiao pagoda also released its strongest pressure of might. When the phantoms of the spears passed through, he moved, wanting to retreat from this space. But the chill affected his speed. Countless branches and leaves twirled toward him as the great path sealed off the space. Yi Futian pointed his finger forward, and the sword will of the great path unleashed to annihilate the space. Open! Ling He let out a great shout. The Lingxi spear was fast as lightning, breaking through this domain of the great path as it rushed out. In the next moment his body flew backward covered in blood. There seemed to be several sword marks on his body, as blood came out from the corners of his mouth. Buzz! Yi Futian came for him in attack. Ling He saw him moving like lightning as a terrifying light appeared in the sky. The Lingxi spear was as fast as lightning, colliding with the sword that Yi Futian had unleashed. Once again his body was knocked back. As he stretched out his hand, the spear flew back into his hand. Enough! Yi Futian still wanted to move forward, but suddenly, a few people appeared in front of him. As their voice fell, they raised their hands and attacked. A horrific phantom of the pagoda appeared, suppressing a corner of the sky. With a loud bang, Yi Futian's body was knocked backward. Those who struck him were two Upper Renhuang cultivators. Yi Futian stopped himself and didn't continue forward. Although Ling He was a despicable person, his strength was undeniably strong. Furthermore, there were people from Ling Xiao Palace in attendance to kill Ling He. But it was wishful thinking. However, the anger in his heart was still burning, unable to be extinguished. You guys are awesome. Yi Futian glanced at the cultivators from Ling Xiao Palace, as he spoke with a touch of cold sarcasm. The people from Ling Xiao Palace felt terribly embarrassed, and Ling He was even gloomier. In this battle, he was unexpectedly defeated. For all the fancy moves, that astonishing blow, everything was so perfect. Without a doubt, he had thought that it would be a one-sided fight, but the ending seemed quite the contrary. That white-haired Renhuang counterstruck with absolutely dominant power, catching him by surprise. Ling He was defeated by a cultivator whose realm was lower than him. This was a huge blow to him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2007, Memory Loss. Chapter 2007, Memory Loss. Didn't Ling He of Ling Xiao Palace want to ask for advice? What's the meaning of your involvement? At this time, some cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower asked those who stepped in to stop Yi Futian. Enough is enough, responded the cultivators from Ling Xiao Palace. Does Ling He concede then? Cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower asked again. The cultivators from Ling Xiao Palace frowned, and cast a look at the Renhuang who spoke. If Ling He can still fight, why did you interfere? The cultivator from Wangshan Watchtower sneered. You were the ones who started the war, and you were the ones who forced its end. Does Ling Xiao Palace really want to ask Wangshan Watchtower for advice? Or are you just taking the opportunity to kick us? If it's the latter, you can just get on with it without pretense. Furthermore, the heir of Ling Xiao Palace, while his realm is higher than that of Yi Lionian, required interference from the people of Ling Xiao Palace. Aren't you guys ashamed? The cultivator from Wangshan Watchtower unleashed his sarcasm without reservation. If I am a cultivator from Ling Xiao Palace, I would have no face to continue staying here. Ling He's eyes were extremely cold. Defeat in itself was something extremely shameful, and now he had been ridiculed so openly and without mercy. When his realm was higher than Yi Futian, he still needed the others from Ling Xiao Palace to intervene and help him avoid Yi Futian's continued attack. This battle was indeed disgraceful. Elders need to say no more. There are many such as this, and we are used to it. Yi Futian turned to the cultivator who had spoken, and the other nodded in acknowledgement but continued. Bravado is easily exposed in the end. If one is a sore loser, one should not challenge and start things. That arrogant and condescending attitude was a bit ironic when you think about it now. Every sound was like a thorn that burnt Ling He's cheeks. It appeared that the others would not easily let him off the hook. Ling Xiao Palace was good at exploiting those who were weaker. The insults from the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower were intentional, deliberately making fun of him to reveal his hypocrisy, and aimed to shame him. It seems that today we would have a chance to see for ourselves if all the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower were this outstanding. An old man spoke as the aura of the Great Path released from the cultivators of Ling Xiao Palace, suppressing this corner of the sky with extreme terror. At this moment, the Millet Emperor's eyes swept over the crowd, and the power of the Great Path permeated from him. Everyone from Ling Xiao Palace felt an overpowering force that made them difficult to move. They looked at Millet Emperor, and the Palace Lord of Ling Xiao Palace took a step forward toward him and said, "What does the Emperor mean by this?" Ling Xiao Palace wanted to exchange with Wangshan Watchtower, and we welcomed the opportunity. However, now whether it was an exchange or something else, I am sure it is clear to everyone who's here. If you want to overpower anyone with numbers, I will have no choice but to handle this personally, said the Millet Emperor. The Palace Lord of Ling Xiao Palace looked at Millet Emperor. If Run Huang on both sides were to interact at the same time, it would put the cultivators of Wangshan Watchtower in great danger, so the Millet Emperor had no choice but to intervene. The Palace Lord of Ling Xiao Palace smiled as a violent and wild aura released from his body, and the same pressure of the Great Path snaked out. Both of them were supreme existence beyond their ranks with great power. When the pressure from both of them bloomed, the sky seemed heavier, as if everything was about to stand still. The battle between the Run Huang below gradually subsided, as many cultivators stepped back to look up at the two men who faced each other in the void. The Palace Lord of Ling Xiao Palace and the Millet Emperor, two powerful men in their own rights. Both of them were filled with the invisible currents of the Great Path, which contained extremely terrible pressure. They did not take action yet, but the cultivators around them already felt the invisible collision. Would they actually collide? The people of those top forces from different regions in the distance were all looking at this side. On this day, Emperor Shi was to cross the divine tribulation, and cultivators from all sides were here. Could they actually see other major figures exchange with one another? Above the sky, there was a dull sound as a suffocating aura appeared in this corner of the sky. Those Run Huang retreated far from this area. Some of them felt their breaths quickened. Their internal organs were churning. "Back up," Li Changxing said. Immediately, the cultivators from Wangshan Watchtower retreated, and the cultivators from the ancient royal family of Yan, as well as those from Ling Xiao Palace, did the same. Only Emperor Yin was still standing there. His majestic golden robe moved with the wind, standing with his hands behind his back, watching the two in silence. At this moment, people in the distance felt that the sky was about to collapse, and there seemed to be infinite elusive shadows between heaven and earth. They raised their heads and stared at the sky. In the vast world, there were many illusory phantoms of the towers, and countless divine monuments flowed down from the sky, suppressing this space. Both of them were experts at the Great Path suppressions. Moreover, their realms had far transcended the ordinary. It was as if they were in control of the power from the source of heaven and earth itself. When they released the coercion of might, those Run Huang retreated, as if they were not fit to be in the same battlefield. Boom! There was a violent bursting sound. Both men made no move, but there was a terrible sonic boom that resounded between the two. The dull rumbling sounds made everyone's heart beat wildly as astonishing currents continued to collide between them, causing a terrifying storm in that space. At this moment, the crowd saw the phantom figure of the two of them that seemed to have moved, and yet they were still where they were. Everyone saw two vague figures touched briefly in the middle then separated. In the next moment, a shocking storm swept out again. Boom! Watch out! Many Run Huang were knocked out by the sweep of that storm, and Yi Futian was the same. The power of the Great Path surged upon his body, but he was still repelled by the storm. He steadied his body in the savage storm. His steps were incredibly heavy. He moved his arms that were covering his eyes and looked forward. In the center of the storm, the two men were still right where they were, as if they had never moved. The terrifying storm did not seem to be caused by them. Emperor Yin was also standing there. His robe flapped wildly in the wind as he quietly looked upon the two men in front of him. He could see clearly that the two had made an exchange in that instant just now. At their level of cultivation, there were not many opportunities to fight against each other. After all, there were very few of them that were at the same level, and they all had various concerns that the impact would be too great to bear. Therefore, the Palace Lord of Lingxiao Palace and the Millet Emperor just collided for a brief instant, which was more than enough. You were here today to observe the ceremony. What exactly are you two doing? At this moment a voice came from a distance. In the distant void, the chief of Donghua Domain Chief's manor stood there and asked. I couldn't help myself wanting to experience Millet Emperor's gate to world suppression. I ask your forgiveness, chief, said the Palace Lord of Lingxiao Palace. Millet Emperor said nothing, merely looking at the other quietly. This is Turtle Deity Island, and everyone here is our guest. Let's not disturb Emperor Shi. If everyone still desire a time to interact, find another time. If you're free next year, everyone is invited for a visit at Donghua Heavens. The chief continued, cease the competing today. Emperor Yan too, will let it go. Emperor Yan nodded slightly and said, since the chief has spoken, let's stop there. However, regarding Eastern Deity Island, it was because the chief had mediated in the past that I didn't touch Eastern Deity Island all these years when Millet Emperor made his promises. But now, something seemed to have changed. Millet Emperor will have to answer for it in the future. This was just an excuse. If it weren't for Yi Futian's extraordinary display of talent, no one from the ancient royal family of Yan would bother to look at Yi Futian at all, much less remembering anything about Eastern Deity Island. Millet Emperor looked at them, still silent. The chief continued. Well, let us be gone now, and not disturb Emperor Shi's cultivation. Very good. The Palace Lord of Lingxiao Palace nodded, then turned around to command. Time to go. After that the group left. Ling He glanced at Yi Futian as he left, with murderous intent in his eyes. Yi Futian detected the other's gaze, but his eyes were equally cold. This debt of Ling Yuan's was impossible to collect at the moment. However, he would remember Ling He. Millet Emperor, we will meet again, said Emperor Yan as he left with his people also. Seeing that there was no more excitement to be had, the cultivators from all sides left one after another. We should go too, said Millet Emperor, and immediately levitated into the air and was gone. After everyone left, above the Turtle Peak, Emperor Shi and Thunder Punishing Skylord looked at those who had scattered in the distance. Emperor Shi sighed in a low voice. The Divine Prefecture, after being peaceful for so many years, will face imminent disturbance again. With Donghuang the Great ruling the world, the Divine Prefecture won't be in chaos, said Thunder Punishing Skylord. What if someone from outside of Divine Prefecture were here? Emperor Shi said. Thunder Punishing Skylord was silent for a moment, and said, having traveled outside these years, I have heard a few things. There were some events that had occurred in the original realm, and some principalities have come to pass, but it had not affected Divine Prefecture for the time being. The original realm. Emperor Shi stretched out his hand, as if wanting to catch something but didn't. After Yi Futian and the others had departed, in the void, the Millet Emperor stood next to Yi Futian, and heard Yi Futian asked him, is there also a grudge between Lingxiao Palace and Wangshan Watchtower? Millet Emperor shook his head. We didn't have too much contact, there is no grudge to speak of. Yi Futian looked pensive. Then, was it because of the incident on the cliff that incensed Lingxiao Palace against Wangshan Watchtower? But it seemed a bit too extreme. Have you inherited Donglai's memory? Millet Emperor asked suddenly. Yi Futian nodded. But not all of it, and they were quite disorganized. Do you any memory of his last battle? Millet Emperor asked. Yi Futian shook his head, looked up at Millet Emperor, and seemed to sense something. How come he was missing such memory? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. In the Wangshan Watchtower, the cultivation training grounds of Millet Emperor, a group of silhouettes descended. It was Millet Emperor's group returning. In the Wangshan Watchtower, the cultivation training grounds of Millet Emperor, a group of silhouettes descended. It was Millet Emperor's group returning. With Millet Emperor's towering cultivation, even traversing over many continents would not need much time. As their group landed, Millet Emperor revealed a pensive look. He seemed to be thinking about something. "Teacher," Li Changxing asked softly, "is there anything that you need me to do?" Millet Emperor shook his head as he looked into the distance. Back then, during the battle when Supreme Deity Donglai perished, what had happened exactly? Even the memories that Yi Futian inherited did not reveal anything about it. Had Supreme Deity Donglai intentionally erased them? If so, had Supreme Deity Donglai intentionally kept it hidden? And did he not want them to know about it? "All of you leave us. Both of you remain," Millet Emperor instructed. He meant for Goddess Donglai and Yi Futian to remain. The other people bowed slightly, and then stepped down one by one. Zhong Chan had a strange look on his face. He could tell that Millet Emperor had matters to discuss. Yet, even he could not know about this matter? "Uncle Millet," Goddess Donglai called out as she looked at Millet Emperor. "Is there something urgent?" "It is nothing," Millet Emperor said, not revealing his thoughts. He instead looked at Yi Futian and asked, "In the previous battle, I saw that you had a murderous intent towards Ling He. What happened between the two of you?" The two of them had fought fiercely against each other. Observers of their battle could tell that they weren't pulling their punches. Their attacks were ferocious, and Yi Futian had calculated his moves against Ling He. He pretended that his sword had been suppressed by Ling Xiao Pagoda, drawing Ling He to attack him close up. Yi Futian had wanted to kill him in a single blow. Millet Emperor had heard of the grudge between the two of them at the cliff face. If Ling He bore hatred against Yi Futian would not have needed to respond in such a fashion. Attacking the young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace so fiercely in such a situation was not worth the risk for such a talented person like Yi Futian, unless there were intricacies that Millet Emperor was not aware of. When Yi Futian heard Millet Emperor's question, a cold look flashed past in his eyes. He replied, "Before this, when we were traveling across the Divine Ocean continent, we encountered two juniors. We got acquainted with them before the cliff face, where thunder-punishing Skylord left his teachings. They wanted to enter Turtle Deity Island to witness Emperor Shi facing his tribulation. I agreed to help them, and brought them to Turtle Deity Island. However, thunder-punishing Skylord told me across transmitted thoughts that, not long after we separated upon arriving on Turtle Deity Island, these two juniors were killed by people sent by Ling He." When Millet Emperor heard Yi Futian's explanation, he revealed a strange look and said, "The young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace cannot even tolerate two juniors. For him to have committed such an atrocity was somewhat demeaning to his station. It is not that he could not tolerate them. He originally gave no regard for the lives of these two juniors. He did not care at all," Yi Futian stated. "A person with such character deserves death." Millet Emperor nodded his head and said, "For you to say such things, he will sooner or later want to kill you." "I understand," answered Yi Futian as he nodded his head. That was why he also wanted to eliminate the other party. However, in the Donghua domain, it was difficult to do so owing to the other party's identity. Millet Emperor gave Yi Futian a serious look. For him to be angered by the deaths of two insignificant people to the point that he wanted to kill the young palace lord of Ling Xiao Palace. The way this fellow did things was extraordinary. He wore his heart on his sleeve. "You have cultivated the power of the divine elephant, and are proficient in suppressing the great path, right?" Millet Emperor asked. Answered Yi Futian while nodding his head. "You have comprehended your cultivation in the Wangshan Watchtower before. What are your thoughts?" Millet Emperor continued asking. "It is as though the Wangshan Watchtower itself is formed from the great path. The aura inside feels as though it is the great path itself. The domain inside has absolute power of suppression," Yi Futian said. Millet Emperor nodded his head and said, "It looks like your comprehension is deep. By comprehending my cultivation in the Wangshan Watchtower, I created a magnum opus called Gate to World Suppression. However, that was because it was compatible with my abilities and combined all the techniques that I comprehended. You are proficient in even more techniques. Hence you can develop it more broadly. I will teach you gate to world suppression. You can then merge it with your own comprehension and further cultivate it. Goddess Donglai revealed an astonished look as she stood there. She had brought Yi Futian over due to his connection with her father. She wanted to find Yi Futian some backing. She was worried about anything happening to him in the future. She was taking precautions just in case. She never imagined that Millet Emperor would pass on his magnum opus to Yi Futian. Gate to World Suppression was a magnum opus that Millet Emperor comprehended himself. Millet Emperor became renowned in the Divine Prefecture due to this technique. He had a few extremely glorious battles before. Even in the Wangshan Watchtower, few people cultivated this technique. Zhong Chan was probably the only other person who truly mastered it. He was a prominent figure who had cultivating abilities very close to that of Millet Emperor. Zhong Chan was probably personally chosen by Millet Emperor to inherit his teachings. However, now Millet Emperor actually wanted to teach Yi Futian Gate to World Suppression. They had only gone on a trip to the Divine Ocean continent together, and Millet Emperor already thought so highly of Yi Futian. However, during this trip, Yi Futian had indeed displayed extreme levels of talent. When he was comprehending the teachings on the cliff face, Thunder-punishing Skylord had also acknowledged him and had transmitted his thoughts over to him. At that time, aside from Ling He, there was another famous figure present, Qin Qing of Divine Palace of Fluttering Snow. She was one of 3 main disciples who were personally trained by Sword Goddess. However, only Yi Futian managed to comprehend the true meaning of the teachings on the cliff face. Yi Futian had also managed to defeat Ling He, who similarly had a flawless great path, and who had higher cultivation than him. With such ability, even Great Yin ancient royal family thought highly of him. Senior, this seems inappropriate, Yi Futian said. After all, he was not a disciple of Millet Emperor. Only Millet Emperor's personal disciples were qualified to cultivate his magnum opus. There's nothing wrong with it. Cultivators do not like to be bound by rules anyway. Since I am the one teaching the way, naturally I will teach it to whoever that I want to teach, Millet Emperor assured Yi Futian. Zhong Chan has mastered Gate to World Suppression. I am sure the skill will be fully utilized in your hands too. Besides that, I can tell that some skills that you cultivate might not be any weaker than Gate to World Suppression. You did not unleash your full potential when you were fighting with Ling He, right? Asked Millet Emperor. With his vision, he could tell quite a lot of things from the battle. Millet Emperor believed that aside from him, other top figures had also comprehended many things from the battle between Ling He and Yi Futian. Ling He didn't just lose to Yi Futian. In reality, the combat ability between the two of them might not even be on the same level. Ling He paled in insignificance when compared to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded, admitting it openly. Goddess Donglai, who was beside him, cast a glance at him. She had chosen Yi Futian because he was acknowledged by the divine tree and had received her father's teachings. However, this top monstrous figure from the original realm was indeed stronger than what she expected. She was curious to find out what Yi Futian's future held. I will impart my knowledge of Gate to World Suppression to you. Receive it without any worries. You can merge it with your other abilities based on your own cultivation, Millet Emperor said. A formless aura permeated from Millet Emperor's body and enveloped Yi Futian. Divine halos directly surged into Yi Futian's mind. They transformed into drawings and were engraved in his mind. After a moment, Yi Futian opened his eyes and bowed slightly at Millet Emperor, saying, "Thank you, teacher." Millet Emperor had imparted his magnum opus to Yi Futian, so he was worthy to be called teacher by Yi Futian. Yi Futian calling Millet Emperor teacher did not mean that he would become his disciple. Millet Emperor nodded with a smile when he heard Yi Futian greeting him as teacher. He replied, "Do not call me teacher when others are around. In the past, I have made a promise, so our relationship now is not that of an actual master and disciple." "I understand," Yi Futian answered as he nodded. "Go and practice," Millet Emperor commanded. Yi Futian turned around and strode towards the skyscraping watchtower. The watchtower was certainly the best place for him to comprehend and cultivate gate to world suppression. After Yi Futian left, Millet Emperor looked at Goddess Donglai. Prior to this, Millet Emperor had not said anything suspicious. However, Goddess Donglai could tell that he was hiding something. Uncle Millet, if you have any thoughts, please do not hide them from me, Goddess Donglai said. Regarding your father's death, I have long suspected that Great Yin ancient royal family was not the only party involved. Millet Emperor explained to Goddess Donglai. Back then, the conflict between Eastern Deity Island and Great Yin ancient royal family was known by all. However, nobody witnessed the final battle. I suspect that other forces might have secretly been involved. Goddess Donglai had a serious expression as she asked Millet Emperor, who else does Uncle Millet think was involved in it? Millet Emperor analyzed. During our trip to Turtle Deity Island this time, what Ling Xiao Palace did was abnormal. They had no grudges with us, so there was no need for them to kick us when we were down. As for the incident at the cliff face, it only involved Ling He and Yi Futian. It was unnecessary for Ling Xiao Palace to magnify the issue, unless they were targeting us for another reason. Ling Xiao Palace was involved in my father's death? Goddess Donglai felt a heavy burden in her heart. She had not dreamt of avenging her father. However, she still felt miserable when she knew that other forces might be involved in the battle, which caused her father's death. She reproached herself for not being strong enough to do something about the matter. I can only say that there is such a possibility, but the truth will eventually be revealed, Millet Emperor murmured. Uncle Millet. Goddess Donglai lowered her head. What's wrong? Millet Emperor asked. If there are other forces involved, looking into it further will. Goddess Donglai didn't finish her sentence, but Millet Emperor understood her words. What would happen if they found out the truth? Knowing the truth would not bring any benefits to Millet Emperor. Great Yin ancient royal family was already very domineering, with rich teachings and resources. The overall ability of the Wangshan Watchtower was weaker when compared to that of Great Yin ancient royal family. If yet another superpower was involved in this case, knowing the truth would definitely bring harm to Millet Emperor. He might as well pretend that he knew nothing and cease his investigation before anything bad happened. I want to know the truth, Millet Emperor declared while raising his head. The scene where he used to sit with Supreme Deity Donglai and discuss the way surfaced in his mind. His old friend had died in vain. Not only could he not avenge his friend, but he also didn't know who his enemy was. This matter had always been a burden in his heart. When cultivators reached Millet Emperor's current cultivation level, it was hard for them to advance further. It was even harder for them to improve themselves if their minds were encumbered with something. Hence, Millet Emperor was determined to find out the truth. Otherwise, he could not live with himself. Goddess Donglai sighed. In reality, she had lost hope in avenging her father. His appearance might be an opportunity. If you have a chance, make a trip to the Donghua heavens, Millet Emperor whispered while looking into the distance. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 2009. The Chief's Invitation. Chapter 2009. The Chief's Invitation. It was year 10,051 of the Divine Prefecture calendar. The Wangshan Watchtower was very quiet. In the watchtower, Yi Futian was cultivating. In the conceptual space of the watchtower, there was another watchtower erected high, akin to an immutable gate. It suppressed the surrounding space, as though it was an eternal existence. Yi Futian sat cross-legged. A dazzling scene appeared around him. It was a brilliant galaxy. Stars were all around the space as they circled around him. Besides that, there were gigantic divine elephants. These divine elephants were like demonic beasts that were traversing the universe. They emanated terrifying pressure of the Great Path, causing this part of the space to weigh down heavily on Yi Futian. Stone tablets appeared in this starry space. Runes of the Great Path seemed to be craved on these stone tablets. The runes emitted the light of the Buddha, while the soul-slaying Buddhist chant could faintly be heard. The stone tablets shone brightly with marvelous divine light. Be it soul or body, everything would perish here. This space was a brand new domain of the Great Path. Yi Futian merged Gate to World Suppression, which was created by Millet Emperor, into his own comprehension to create this unique technique. The origin of this new technique was Gate to World Suppression, yet these two techniques were slightly different. As for which technique was stronger, it still depended on the cultivator, who unleashed the technique. Gate to World Suppression unleashed by Millet Emperor, who had a powerful cultivation, was naturally much stronger than the new technique unleashed by Yi Futian. Of course, Yi Futian also cultivated the Great Path of Suppression. Hence, the technique created by him was also very powerful. Outside the Wangshan watchtower, a few silhouettes approached the area. They looked in the direction where the watchtower was. Their gazes saw through the conceptual space, seemingly able to witness Yi Futian cultivating inside. Younger brother Yi is impressive. It has only been a few months, and he has already merged Gate to World Suppression into his own comprehension, creating such a domineering Great Path domain. Li Changxing said, "Young brother Zong, it seems that what I said is true. In the future, young brother Ye's ability might be on par with yours." Zong Chan, who was beside Li Changxing, smiled nonchalantly. He said, "Before his arrival, I was the only one among the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower who has inherited Master's Gate to World Suppression. It is better now that young brother Yi has such achievements. I hope that he can also forge a flawless upper-level Renhuang Divine Wheel. His achievements are my motivation. I am more motivated to improve myself, since I can't stand being surpassed by younger brother Yi." Zong Chan lamented, "My path of training is one that has been traveled by Master before." On the other hand, younger brother Yi merges Master's skill into his own technique. Considering this, he is indeed stronger than me. Li Changxing comforted him by saying, "Don't put it like that. You walk the path that Master has treaded on before exactly, because you are the chosen one. You are born with a talent that is similar to Master's. Therefore, you have had a smooth training journey following Master's footsteps. Because of that, you were also able to maintain a flawless divine wheel when you broke through to the upper-level Renhuang Pain. If you continue to cultivate and refine your skills, you might be able to surpass Master." What Changxing says is not wrong. Everyone has different fateful encounters. It is impossible for any two people to walk the exact cultivation journey. Zong Chan, you will surely surpass me in the future. Do not doubt yourself. If younger brother Yi can do the same as you, then it is convenient for both of you to compare yourself against each other. With comparison will you gain motivation. Since you have reached this stage in your cultivation, you must also have a sense of respect and not be proud. Similarly, you must also have strong beliefs to reach the peak. Millet Emperor advised as he looked at Li Changxing and Zong Chan. He had appeared high above them. "Master." Both of them greeted as they bowed when they saw Millet Emperor appear. "We will remember your advice." Their master meant to say that once they had reached their current stage, they were already at the top level of cultivation, standing above all of creation. There did not seem to be much room for improvement for them, yet they still had a long way to go. They could not be blindly arrogant, but also needed intense self-confidence. It appeared to be paradoxical, yet it was complementary. If cultivation was like climbing a mountain, they were at the top of the mountain. The only place left to go was the peak. "What news do all of you bring with you?" Millet Emperor asked. Replied Li Changxing as he nodded his head. "Today, it is the year 10,051 of the Divine Prefecture calendar. Another 50 years have passed. News has come from the Donghua heavens. They have invited the cultivators from the various continents of the Donghua domain to gather." Millet Emperor nodded his head and said, "On Turtle Deity Island, Chief has already reminded us of this event. It is no surprise that he will send messengers over soon." Li Changxing and Zong Chan nodded their heads in agreement. They believed Millet Emperor's deduction. As expected, just as Millet Emperor finished saying this, an intense wave of power of the Great Path of Space came from the sky above. A brilliant divine spatial light descended from the sky. A group of people then appeared high above the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower. They had arrived, Li Changxing muttered as he looked over in their direction. The group of figures approached the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower and looked over here from a distance. One of their members said in a loud voice, "By order of the chief, we have come to invite Senior Millet Emperor, as well as the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower, to the Donghua heavens for a gathering. Please inform Chief that I will be bringing the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower to the Donghua heavens." Millet Emperor replied as he gazed into the distance. "Many thanks, Millet Emperor," replied the people who had come. "We will return with your response. Farewell." As they said this, golden lightning radiated from their bodies. Their figures immediately disappeared from their positions. It was as though they had never been here in the first place. At that moment, the cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower were all looking over in that direction with their heads raised. They naturally understood that the chief the messengers referred to was the Donghua domain's domain chief. Aside from him, who else dared to refer to themselves as chief before Millet Emperor? The cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower were somewhat surprised. However, for Millet Emperor and the others, this was within their expectations. Hence they appeared very calm. Domain Chief's manner invited the cultivators of the Donghua domain. They would personally send messengers to superpowers to invite them over. This was to show them due respect. As for the other cultivators of the Donghua domain, as well as the cultivators from other continents, it was up to them. Domain Chief's manner would not personally invite them. This was more of a logistical constraint. However, one could imagine that, after the grand occasion on Turtle Deity Island last year, the Donghua Heavens would organize an event that surpassed that of Turtle Deity Island in terms of scale. Domain Chief's manor had waited 50 years before gathering the top forces of various continents, as well as the cultivators of the Donghua domain again. Right at this moment, Yi Futian's aura fluctuation could be sensed from the watchtower. The Great Path domain dissipated as the galaxy disappeared. Yi Futian came out from the watchtower. Millet Emperor and the rest detected Yi Futian's movement and shifted their gazes towards him. His silver hair was dancing in the wind while his gaze was as profound as the galaxy. His temperament was otherworldly. If it wasn't because Millet Emperor knew that Yi Futian was from the original realm, he would most likely assume that Yi Futian was from one of the super powerful families. "Teacher," Yi Futian greeted Millet Emperor. He stopped not far away from the group and bowed slightly at Millet Emperor. Then he looked at Li Chongqing and Zhong Chan and greeted, "Elder brothers. Did you succeed in your cultivation?" Li Chongqing asked with a smile. Yi Futian answered, "Gate to world suppression is marvelous. With my current level of cultivation, I still can't comprehend all of it. I can only incorporate what I have managed to comprehend into my skill. I still have a long way to go. Younger brother always speaks so humbly," Li Chongqing said jokingly. Yi Futian smiled as he shrugged his shoulders. "Just now I overheard that the domain chief is gathering all the cultivators in the Donghua domain," asked Yi Futian. Millet Emperor nodded in affirmation. "Previously, when we were at Turtle Deity Island, we didn't manage to forge connections with the cultivators from Domain Chief's manor. This is a good opportunity if you want to enter Domain Chief's manor. With your ability, there shouldn't be any problems." Yi Futian nodded, inquiring, "Will teacher and elder brothers attend the gathering this time? Chief has personally invited us. Moreover, this is an event that occurs once every 50 years. Everyone in the Donghua domain will show him face. The cultivators of the Wangshan watchtower are no exception," Millet Emperor replied. After all, Domain Chief's manor was the ruling force of the Donghua domain in name. The domain chief was appointed by Donghuang the Great. Since Chief had personally sent a representative to invite them to the gathering, all the cultivators who trained in the Donghua domain would give Chief face and attend the event. "Understood." Yi Futian nodded slightly. Domain Chief's manor was the core area of the Donghua domain. It was located in the Donghua heavens. After he entered Domain Chief's manor, it meant that he would have the chance to come in contact with the top forces in the Divine Prefecture. Once he was on the radar of the top forces of the Divine Prefecture, he might encounter some old friends again. Even though the Divine Prefecture was huge, it only had 18 domains. Every domain chief's manor in each domain was a core area in the Divine Prefecture. Domain Chief's manor in the Donghua domain was no exception to that. What would Yi Futian do if he encountered his old friends? It seemed like Millet Emperor's suggestion was right on point. Yi Futian indeed needed to enter Domain Chief's manor to cultivate. Once he became a member of Domain Chief's manor, his former enemies would not dare to attack him lightly even if they met in the future. Once he entered Domain Chief's manor, it was equivalent to him entering the core forces of the Divine Prefecture. He was also one step closer to Donghuang the Great. He should also be closer to revealing the truth about his origins and the secret of his godfather. By the time he broke through to the upper-level Renhuang plane, he should be able to slowly unveil these skeletons in the closet, right? He also had no idea what was going on in the original realm now. Did Jiyu manage to find herself again? Did Yu Sheng go to cultivate in the Devil World? Back when Yi Futian was still in the original realm, Devil General Mei Ting had also remained there. Mei Ting certainly had a deep connection with Yu Sheng. Would he bring Yu Sheng along when he left? Yi Futian had no answers to any of these questions. Right now, the main thing that he needed to focus on was to break through to the upper-level Renhuang plane as soon as possible. Since he came to the Divine Prefecture, his level of cultivation had been improving at the speed of lightning. However, once he reached his current level of cultivation, it was extremely difficult to break through to the next plane. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.